Your feelings may waver back and forth again and again. There's loneliness, there's need, there's the feeling of, gee, I had a happy marriage. I don't want to spend the rest of my life as a single person. But I am still very much involved with the grief process, and you can't be rushed on that.
Did you push record?
Thanks for tuning in again to Second Act TV. With me again is Jeanne Nelson, marriage and family therapist, and my friend Jeanne. Thank you so much for staying over.
Very glad to be here, Selka.
Well, we will link to our first segment that we just finished with Jeanne on starting over again after the loss of a spouse. Jeanne's story is, not only is she a marriage and family therapist who counsels people on this topic, but she lived through this after losing her husband of 27 years. So in our first segment, we discussed just getting through that process and how friends can, well-meaning people can and, cannot help in that process. What I want to pick up on now, Jeanne, is getting back out there again. How do you know that you're ready to start dating again? And as I mentioned before, we did other segments on this, and we've got so much engagement, but people asking, gosh, we'd love to hear from somebody who's actually gone through this. And thus, here you are, giving both, speaking both from a professional perspective as well as from a personal one. So talk us through that, Jeanne. How do we know we're ready, and then how do we go about it?
Yeah, two very important ways of looking at that. Yeah, how do you know, and then what do you do? First of all, as far as how you know, it's not a pinpoint in time. Your feelings may waver back and forth again and again. There's loneliness, there's need, there's the feeling of, gee, I had a happy marriage. I don't want to spend the rest of my life as a single person. I'm not somebody who's jaded and bitter about marriage. I really like the idea. But I am still very much involved with the grief process. And you can't be rushed on that. Don't let friends try to push you toward it. And sometimes you'll have people who might be pushing you away from it. Like maybe you have children who aren't ready to see that happen. So I think the first part is listening to your heart, being aware of when you feel ready. And then that may come in stages, may come in waves. You might make a little foray out there and then pull back if you're not feeling comfortable about it.
Right. You brought up, of course, a good point, and that is, the influence of other people, for, against, family, speaking both from a professional perspective, how you would counsel others, and then what you actually went through. Does anybody's opinion matter other than yours?
People's opinion, your opinion, of course, is what matters. But the fact is you are going to be influenced by the people who are closest to you and their opinions. And especially if it's maybe your husband's friends or family, or most especially your children. Now, I think when it comes to your own friends, your husband's friends, you have to be willing to prevail and say, okay, this is how I feel. I was very lucky. Just about everybody in my life really supported this. So I didn't have to fight that battle. But I could see that if I had children who weren't ready, depending on their ages, that could be a real issue. For adult children, boy, I've seen relationships that get screwed up right from the beginning because the widow or widower will not stand up to the adult children and say, you are not going to be here for the rest of my life to hold my hand and walk me into my old age. So you have to let me find somebody who will and let me go on with my life. Yeah. This is no disrespect or lack of love to your parent.
Yeah. I think people will really appreciate hearing that too, based on some of the comments we've gotten. Well, so you went the online dating route, right?
I did. I think that's the next step is then what do you do? And it would be very nice if we could just all organically meet somebody through work or church or the gym or being introduced by a friend, but that rarely happens when you're of a certain age. I mean, the fact is you're in your social circle. There just are not that many people available. So being willing to go online is an important part of the process, which is how I met my husband. And all the usual recommendations for protecting yourself and being careful, of course, apply when you're going to do that. And you're going to do it in whatever stages you want. I'd do a few dates, get discouraged, maybe pull back. Met some people who were very nice gentlemen, but not for me, just didn't click. Yeah. And I think that the tricky part is that you have the added complication as a widower where you're still feeling a real attachment to your late mate.
And as you should, as you will. And
as you will.
Yeah.
It's normal.
Yeah.
It's perfectly normal. And you hope that whoever you're dating is mature and respectful of that. But you also can't expect whoever you're dating to always be second fiddle to memory. And they want to feel important too. Yeah. So making that space for a new person is difficult. One of the things I learned, I became aware of, was how often, it was really hard for me to pull back on this, how often I referenced my late husband in the conversation. It was like he was always there. Yeah. Everything, places we'd gone, things we'd done, and every memory seemed to involve him, and I'd be chattering away, and I'm with somebody else here who maybe doesn't want to have that memory sitting between us. I realized how many times I said we when I could have said I. And that was something I had to learn. I was sitting at dinner with a friend with my now husband Joel one day when I was talking about when we were in Italy, and he kind of looked startled, and then he said, "Oh, yes, that's right. You meant a different we. That wasn't us. I was wondering when we'd ever gone to Italy." And I thought, yeah, that's not really fair to talk about we when he's sitting right there. Yeah. I could change that to I. I was in Italy. I don't have to bring Lee along with me every time on that trip when I'm talking about it. That's just being sensitive to the other person there.
I think what I've learned doing some previous videos, and what one of the reasons really I wanted to have you on is that it's really a matter of, awareness, education, perhaps on both sides. That, what you just said, what you became aware of, what you can do, but then also for people, the one dating you. I mean, I was just very briefly dated somebody, and I mentioned that on the video, to where, I just didn't think I was ever going to live up to the memory, and that was that. But the whole idea that the person dating somebody who lost a loved one, not to think of it as a competition. And for some reason, that made sense to me. We do tend to sometimes make it a competition. How would you advise somebody listening on that?
Everybody wants to feel number one, and I can certainly understand that. And I think it's a real sign of maturity when somebody can get past that feeling of trying to compete with the ex. And when do I ever get to hear something bad about this person so I can at least...
Yeah, like your ex-wife.
Yeah, exactly. That would be so much easier. But
it is.
I do think that both people have to be aware that you're not going to expect this new person to fill somebody else's shoes and to do the things they used to do. And that you make a point of appreciating that person for who they are and what they do. She's not going to be the cook my late wife was. He's not going to be the handyman my late husband was. What do I enjoy about this person that's special and unique? And to really emphasize those things and reinforce those things in each other. I had a friend who told me once she had married a man who had lost his wife. He was a widower. And she said, the one thing that I just had to say, sometimes was, okay, I get it. I get it. Like she didn't need to keep hearing about the wonderful marriage. Yeah, I get it. Um, Nothing is ever all one way. And yes, of course, when you've lost a mate, you don't want to talk about the things that pissed you off and that person did wrong. But there are always those things too. And there are always things that are very special about the person who's in front of you that you never had before and that you really appreciate now having for the first time.
Yeah. Well, before we end this segment and go on to, getting into a new relationship, did you feel that you had to give yourself permission to love again? Like I guess the question is, when did you know that this is going to be serious with Joel? And was there some emotions that you had to deal with to allow yourself to go there?
It was a process. I had been single for several years before I met him, over 3 years. So, I had time to work through that. I dated other people, none as seriously. And I think at that time in my life, I found myself opening up, and I was really pretty careful in the beginning because I didn't want to get too emotionally enmeshed too quickly, because I could see that could happen. The one thing I did do that I realized, and I know we talked about this in a previous segment, the one thing that I did do was make it clear to him once we'd been dating a few months and we were intimate and we were getting closer, was this needed to be exclusive, because that was something I hadn't even asked about. And when I did, he said, no, he wasn't really thinking of that. And I said, well, in that case, we cannot proceed, because I knew who I was and I knew I was emotionally ready. And whether or not it happened, I didn't know if it would, but I couldn't be allowing myself to be with someone where I didn't feel like I had his full attention.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah,
that's pretty important.
I'll link to that segment. I remember that, how and when to ask for. That was a good segment. Great. Well, Jeanne, it's we're at the end of this one. Anything else that you want to leave us with? Did I not ask you a question you wanted to say something about?
Well, making room for somebody new in your life is a pretty ongoing and difficult process. I did it in stages, and I think that'll be something that will be good for us to talk about, just exactly how you go about that. Yeah, so we will talk about that next.
Yeah. We'll see you on our next segment of Second Act TV.
Okay.
If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right over here. Just click on through to YouTube. When you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too. We'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.